Okay, let's unpack this stack of sources and see what they tell us about the upcoming 2025 NFL draft.
Yeah, let's do it.
The countdown is definitely on, and Green Bay next year, right? So the anticipation is building.
Sure.
You've shared this pile of analyses, research, even the official rule book. And our mission today really is to dig into it, pull out the most important nuggets, maybe some surprising facts, and just give you a shortcut to feeling, really well informed about the whole draft landscape.
Sounds good.
We're going to look at scouting reports on top prospects, break down team needs, explore some potential trades.
Always fun.
Dive into historical data, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
See how the fantasy world values these rookies.
Yeah.
And peek at the actual rules that make it all happen. Ready to jump in?
Absolutely. It's like you said, piecing together a complex mosaic, really. You've got the players, the teams, the history,
right,
the hits and misses, and, all these market forces at play. Understanding how they all interact, that's where the real insight is.
Speaking of the individual pieces, let's start where so much draft talk begins.
Yeah.
The quarterbacks.
Always.
This source from Underdog Network gives us a deep dive into 3 QBs ranked just outside maybe that top tier, starting with Jalen Milroe, their QB3.
Oh, okay.
And right off the bat, they highlight his absurd athleticism. I mean, reading this, they basically say he could be one of the best QB rushers in the NFL, like day one.
Yeah.
Speed bordering on 4.3s, serious power. They kind of say it's almost silly to dwell on it because it's a given floor for his value.
And that rushing floor, that's incredibly valuable in today's NFL. A QB who can threaten defenses with his legs, design runs, or improvising, it just changes everything.
Oh, totally.
Changes how defenses align, opens up other stuff. It's a unique, bankable trait.
It really is. But here's the flip side, and where it gets, really interesting. Despite that incredible athleticism and what sounds like just unlimited arm strength, this source has 60-plus yards without even stepping into it. His passing game has, significant struggles, specifically with touch.
Yeah, that's the rub.
They mentioned misfires, too much heat on short throws, a lot of uncatchable passes, sometimes sailing, quote, into the cheerleaders section. How do you even square that arm talent with those accuracy issues?
Well, that discrepancy, that's one of the central challenges in evaluating him, right? The source points to some technical things, maybe a compact motion that lacks touch, potential issues with his feet not being tied to his motion.
Okay.
Especially when, indecision forces late throws. His accuracy was better in 23, especially firing it into the middle where that velocity works.
Okay.
But those touch throws outside, deep, still inconsistent. They do acknowledge the environment around him, new offense, drops, poor O-line.
Sure, the context matters.
But they also say he shares some blame. Still, given all that, they grade him late round 1, high upside bet. Okay,
let's move to Shedeur Sanders. QB4 for this source. They lead with his strengths. Describe him as an accurate touch thrower from the pocket.
Yeah, and his pocket presence, that accuracy, those are definitely the key selling points here. The source notes his willingness to throw over the middle, high, catchable arc against zone shows anticipation. What really stands out, though, from this analysis is how well he avoids turnover-worthy plays. Just 1.7% they tracked.
Wow.
Which is great, considering he targets the middle of the field where things can get dangerous. And, his toughness, given the pressure he faced, that's notable, too.
But the concerns detailed here, they seem pretty significant.
They are.
Subpar arm strength, especially outside the pocket. Mediocre athleticism for an NFL QB, and this persistent pocket drifting problem.
Yeah, the drifting.
The source is pretty blunt about the Colorado offense, too, calling it absolutely not pro-styled, no under-center snaps, tons of screens.
He led Power 5 QBs in screen receptions, yeah.
Said he rarely saw base defenses. The reps just don't look like NFL plays often.
And that pocket drifting, that's a major red flag. It puts him in compromised positions. That low EPA lost to sacks. It's not just the O-line's fault. He contributes by moving backward.
Right.
And when he does try to scramble, the source says he often gets tracked down. Speed isn't dynamic for the next level.
So combining all that,
they basically doubt he could lead an offense capable of competing with, top-tier playoff teams. The comp is more replacement-level starter, maybe a quality backup, Teddy Bridgewater mold maybe if he cleans up the sacks. Grade. Early round 2.
Okay. Finally, Tyler Shough, QB5. His story is just tough luck.
Yeah, quite a journey.
Behind Herbert, COVID, broken clavicles, broken fibula. He's older, 25. But this source notes he finally got a clean run at Louisville. Pro-styled system, relatively speaking. Performed well without elite talent.
And that journey, that definitely adds a layer to his evaluation. This source highlights his style as almost like nostalgic, play-action asset, live arm, but a risk-averse approach. They point out low turnover-worthy plays on early downs, best sack rate under pressure in the class, 9%. Suggests good processing, knows when to throw it away.
Maybe sometimes too quickly, they said.
Maybe, but probably better than taking sacks. They grade his intermediate and deep accuracy as, average, but the arm strength is there for any NFL throw.
Okay. And athleticism.
Good straight line speed, 4.6340, can run bootleg, scramble a bit, but they call him a cautious rusher. Actually had negative cumulative EPA on runs according to their data.
Huh. Interesting. Concerns.
Injuries, maybe showing up at the collision point, tries away from contact sometimes, can get panicked if the play breaks down after play action. Comps are like older Jared Goff, old Ryan Tannehill, old Mason Rudolph grade, round 2.
So these three guys, Milroe with the huge tools and questions, Sanders with the pocket feel but mobility and system concerns, Shough with maturity but age and injury flags.
Yeah. Exactly. Distinct packages. For teams needing a QB outside the very, very top, it's about weighing these different profiles against their own situation, their coaching. It's a critical decision.
Which leads us perfectly to those team needs. This next source looks at the 5 biggest roster holes for all 32 teams after free agency.
And understanding these needs is just fundamental. It tells you who teams might target, where the leverage points for trades could be, forces that classic dilemma, best player available versus filling a glaring need.
And some of these needs really do jump off the page. This source says the Giants, picking 3rd, still need that long-term QB solution despite signing vets. Patriots at 4 need to build around May. AOL, WR, help. Reportedly worst AOL last year.
Ouch.
Panthers at 8, historically bad defense last year. Need edge, safety, corner, DL, basically everything on D before offense.
Wow.
And the Saints at 9, with Carr's health maybe shaky, could be tempted by a QB if one falls. Plus need CB, AOL, WR.
So right away you see potential QB landing spots or teams maybe looking to move.
Yeah, and early on, Jags at 5 need defensive depth, skill players for Lawrence, DL, CB, SOL, WR, depth. Raiders at 6 need difference makers, RB1, WR1, CB, OL, LB, around Geno Smith.
Geno a QB for the Raiders, right?
Jets at 7 need OL, WR, TE, help for Justin Fields. Bears at 10, got to solidify that O-line, final left tackle, plus DL, RB, STE needs.
A lot of needs early, as you'd expect.
But it extends way beyond the top 10, too. Teams picking later, losing key guys. Niners at 11 lost DL, edge, OL guys.
Yeah, some significant departures there.
Dolphins at 13 need O-line help after Armstead retired. Potential CB, S losses too. Colts at 14 need TE, OL for Richardson. Or Daniel Jones, interesting.
Keep both options open.
Falcons at 15 desperately need pass rush help. This source says they've ranked last in QB pressure race since 2019.
That is not good. A clear priority.
Further down, Chargers at 18 need offensive firepower, RBWR, despite signings. Lions at 28 need edge, OL safety, DL, WR. Commanders at 29 need edge after losing Fowler.
Filling holes.
Chiefs at 30 need depth. Pretty much across the board. OL, DL, edge, WR, safety. Even the Eagles at 32. Not screaming needs, but could use depth at SDL, CB, edge, OL after losing guys.
So, yeah, loads of specific needs. And you can see why draft day gets chaotic. Teams jockeying for position.
Which brings us to trades. Always the drama, right? This source from PFF suggests 6 specific hypothetical trades that could really shake things up.
And these potential trades, this is where that strategic game theory really comes alive. Connecting needs, player slides, draft capital.
Exactly. Like, this source suggests the Steelers trading up if maybe Shedeur Sanders starts to slide.
Makes sense. Potential QB need there.
Or the Bears, using those 2 second-rounders they have, maybe get aggressive. Move up for an impact defender like Abdul Carter from Penn State. PFF loved his pass rush grade.
Yeah, using assets to target a specific player type.
What stands out about these hypotheticals is how team context drives them. PFF suggests the Broncos. They have a top-ranked O-line, right, but need an RB. Maybe make a bold move, trade up for Ashton, Jeanty, even if it's not conventional value.
Right. Shows how existing strengths can shape priorities. Or the Bills' Super Bowl window with Allen. Trade up for an impact defender. Derrick Harmon, interior pressure. Will Johnson, lockdown corner. Find that piece to get over the hump.
And it's not just trading up. Browns picking at 33, start of day 2. Maybe trade back into round 1. Deal with someone like the Vikings at 24. Secure a QB they like before the second round. Feeding frenzy.
It really underscores that these picks aren't static. They're currency. They're tools to maneuver.
That whole strategic element, the trading, it's fascinating. And it makes you wonder, how often do teams actually get it right?
The million-dollar question.
Well, our next source takes a historical look at draft success using data. An analysis found on Reddit looking at drafts from 1990 to 2022 uses a metric called Next Alternative Value, NAV.
Right, NAV. Let's break that down a bit. It's trying to approximate the value a team got. Looks at the difference in career. Approximate value, AV, between the player drafted and the next player drafted at the same position later on. The source admits AV has limits. Picking the very next guy isn't perfect, but it's a tool. A way to quantify if teams generally picked a player who provided more value than someone else available later.
Gotcha. And the findings. Pretty insightful about teams and specific picks.
Yeah, the data shows some teams have just been better over this long haul. Figure 1 in the source. Cleveland. Historically bad by this metric.
Oof.
New Orleans is great drafting offense, terrible on defense. Green Bay, Pittsburgh, consistently strong. Baltimore, impressive on both sides.
And what about specific pick numbers? That was really interesting.
Yeah, figure 2. Confirms pick #1 is historically the most likely to provide big value. No shock there.
Sure.
But then you see picks like #4 and especially #22 and #23 generating significantly less NAV on average, sometimes even negative, suggests teams picking in the early 20s have historically been worse at picking a guy better than the next one at that position.
Whoa. So picking at #1 is great, but early 20s, not so much historically.
That's what this data suggests. By the time you get to the 40s, 50s, the hit rate drops off a lot. Maybe trading down from those spots is smarter sometimes.
So why picks 22, 23? Did this source have examples?
Yeah, some infamous ones. Packers taking Stan Thomas at 22 and 91. Eric Williams went later. Cowboys taking Tyrone Poole at 22 and 95. Ty Law went 23. And maybe the most famous recent one, Browns taking Manziel at 22 and 14. Teddy Bridgewater went 32. It's a mix, right? Missing on the pick plus a much better player going soon after.
Luck versus evaluation.
Bit of both, probably. The comments discuss that. The data also showed that offense-defense split for teams, like we mentioned with New Orleans, reinforces those tendencies.
It really just underscores how tough it is, even with all the scouting, hitting on a pick, especially outside the very top.
Incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And it's not just NFL teams doing the evaluating. There's this whole other market out there, fantasy football.
Yes.
Our next source, a Reddit post from Our Dynasty FF, compares the fantasy value of top rookies. Uses that keep trade cut metric, KTC, for classes 2021 through 2025.
Okay, so KTC, that's like user-driven fantasy value, right?
Yeah.
Reflects perception, usually a couple weeks after the NFL draft.
Exactly. Based on future fantasy production potential. A totally different lens than NFL Fit or traditional scouting, driven by this big community consensus.
And looking at their table, there are some eye-popping data points.
Right. Ashton Jeanty, 2025 RB. His initial KTC value is basically tied with Bijan Robinson from 23 at the very top of the RB list across these years.
That's huge. Is Bijan's success propping him up, or is the market revaluing RBs? The comments debated that.
Then there's Travis Hunter, listed WRCB for 25, shows up as the number 3 overall WR value across all these classes in this fantasy metric. Shows how unique guys get perceived.
Wild. And the tight ends? Pitts versus Bowers.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts from 21 had a way higher initial KTC value than Brock Bowers from 24, even though some analysts liked Bowers just as much, maybe more.
So the market was maybe too high on Pitts, too low on Bowers, landing spot maybe hurt Bowers?
That's the discussion in the comments. Plus, maybe general hesitation now on rookie TEs after Pitts didn't instantly meet that sky-high value.
It also shows guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, Garrett Wilson, relatively low initial KPC values compared to others, but they turned out pretty good.
Right. Comments noted Gibbs's value was likely down because of the Montgomery signing, maybe the surprise draft capital. Shows how fluid that initial perception is.
And maybe the weirdest one, Cam Skedobo, a 2025 RB.
Yeah.
He's on this list with notable KTC value, but he's like a projected late-round pick, 4th round maybe.
And the comments section trying to figure out why is just gold. Cool name, rare white RB, his running style. Just pure overvaluation. It's a perfect example of how subjective, maybe irrational these fantasy values can be sometimes.
It really emphasizes that player value. It's not one number. Depends who's evaluating and why. NFL scout, data analyst, fantasy manager, different goals.
Totally different perspectives.
Okay, finally, let's pull back. Look at the actual framework. How does this whole thing even happen? Our source from NFL Football Operations gives us the official rules.
Yeah, easy to forget there's a whole detailed rule book behind the scenes. Understanding the mechanics, it gives you an appreciation for the complexity.
So the order. Reverse order of finish for non-playoff teams. Then playoff teams, based on how far they got, then record. Tiebreakers like strength of schedule.
Right, and they explain compensatory picks too. Awarded for net free agent losses, complex formula, adds extra picks, rounds 3 through 7.
And the actual selection process. It's pretty structured. Teams call HQ from their draft room.
Reps on site write the name on a card, give it to a runner, reviewed by a league official like Ken Fior. Then the pick's announced, clock resets.
What about passing or trades?
Interesting rules there. A team can pass, but they can still pick later, just risk losing their guy. Trades need both teams to call the head table, get league approval, specific rules for how the clock works after a trade. It's formal.
And eligibility.
Pretty strict. 3 years out of high school, college eligibility used up, or declare early. That early declaration process gets vetted by NFL player personnel staff.
And the source brings in history here too, right? Contrasting high picks like Burrow with late-round legends.
Yeah. Starr, Deacon Jones, Terrell Davis, Tom Brady. Great reminder that no matter the process, no matter the draft slot, finding and developing talent is the ultimate challenge.
It really drives home that even with this highly structured system, the outcomes are just far from guaranteed.
Absolutely.
Wow, okay. We really covered a lot of ground today.
And we did.
We dissected some specific QB prospects, looked deep into team needs across the league, explored potential trades, analyzed historical draft data.
Looked at a fantasy angle.
Right, and wrapped up with the actual rules. The goal was just to pull out those key insights from all these sources, help you look at the draft with a maybe more informed perspective.
Yeah, hopefully seeing how these different layers interact, scouting, needs, data, market perception, gives you a richer understanding of why the draft is so compelling and so unpredictable.
Definitely.
Which, it raises an important question, I think. Given the historical data, how hard it is to hit on picks, even high ones, given the variability in player value across different methods, and the structured but kind of chaotic trade environment, how much is draft success really about finding the right player? And how much is it about that player landing in the right situation, with the right coaching, the right infrastructure to actually succeed?
That's a great question. Something to really ponder.
Yeah, something for you to think about as we get closer to draft day.
A fascinating thought to leave you with. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive into the 2025 NFL draft landscape. We hope you enjoy watching it all unfold with maybe some of this new insight.